this afternoon. We appreciate the opportunity for you to really make your application come alive and articulate, the things that we're going to be asking you today. So are we ready to go? Okay, good. Okay, good. Is the sound on now? Yep. Good. Okay. So I think we'll just get started and we'll do some introductions. We can start over here with Clint, and then you guys can introduce your team when you introduce yourselves.
All right, so Clint Garcia, Chief Operations Officer with the district.
Dan Bonnell, Area Director.
Jennifer Marsh, Chief Academic Officer.
Thank you. I did it the reverse way.
It's on there.
Red light on.
Oops. Cami Costello, Assistant Director.
Laura Jean Downs, Director.
Penny Dillon, second grade classroom teacher and K through sixth grade reading specialist.
Okay. And we have Melanie on. Mel, do you want to introduce yourself? Okay. All right. And we have Tammy coming here in a little bit. So, well, like I said, thanks for this opportunity today. We're excited to be able to, as we've dug into the application a little bit, then be able to generate maybe some clarity and some questions that we're going to ask you. We're scheduled to go up until 6 o'clock, but just based off, the answering of the questions and how these guys are feeling as far as, do we have enough information then to move forward? I'll just describe the process. We're here for our capacity interview tonight. We'll take the information that we glean from that. We'll go back into our criteria rubric, and if there's anything we need to add to it, beef up. If there's questions, obviously, that'll be answered tonight that we want to add into that rubric, that scoring device, we will. And then over the next week and a half or so, we do have a couple community meetings coming up that first week in February, which really is an opportunity for the community with board members to interact around the application and talk a little bit more Mesa Valley Community School. And during that time period, this team will just continue to do the work it needs to, and then we'll summarize the data that we've gotten, obviously from here and just from our overall review. And then we're scheduled on the 7th of February. Jennifer and I will then present. It's a work session, so we'll just go ahead and present the results of really the scoring of how things have worked out. Just so you know, our District Accountability Committee last Thursday worked on their sections of the rubric, and so they were able to interact with sections of your application and kind of develop some questions. And actually, there's some questions that landed on the capacity interview that we'll be asking tonight. And so we really feel like our process up to this point is gathering and really putting together a nice body of evidence to turn over on February 7th to the Board of Education, in which then they'll have the opportunity to interact with that data. They've had the application from the beginning, so they'll have 2 weeks up until February 21st, and if they're ready to make a decision, that would be the time that action would be taken. Okay? So, any questions before we get started? Anybody? Okay. And
You need to use the restroom.
Yeah.
The door is unlocked, and it's through this, you know where it's at, through these double doors. Take a right through that with a double door ahead, and then you'll see it right there on the left.
Okay. And we've each got a set of questions. We'll interact with the questions. You guys are more than welcome to, turn, and whoever's the qualified one, or if you want to joint answer a question, or all four of you can answer a question. That's completely up to you. So, okay? All right. We'll go ahead and get started. I'll start us off with a question around mission and vision. So, obviously your mission and vision, and because it's the circumstances around having to restructure an already existing system at Mesa Valley Community School, can you just articulate really how that new structuring affects your Mesa Valley Community School mission and vision?
She wrote it.
Sure. Yes, so it's kind of interesting because after years of trying to lean away from the word homeschooling, we're now leaning into the word homeschooling. Our students At this point, about half of them are, I mean, grade-wise, half of them are actual homeschooled students that we help. We partner with their parents and we provide part-time education for them on our site. Prior to this, almost all of our students were not homeschooled students. They schooled at home a lot of the time, and they often spoke of themselves as homeschoolers, but they were not homeschoolers. Now we're moving a different way to where we're actively supporting them as homeschool students, although we will still have a full-time program for full-time students who are public school students. It gets a little confusing, trying to make sure we're keeping it straight who we're talking about, because we actually have different kinds of students now, very distinct different kinds of students. So when we rewrote our mission and vision, we just kind of leaned into that a little bit, just to kind of clarify that we really are working very hard to actively partner with homeschool families in this. I hope that's what you were looking for. If there's anything else, we can try and clarify that.
Thank you.
Sorry I was late. I'm not trying to be rude. I actually was stuck in court, and I don't get to dictate the judge's
You told them.
schedule. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to talk about goals, objectives, and pupil performance standards. So my first question, it has to do with your academic growth goals. And you talk about your academic growth goal, but you don't identify the assessment. How will these goals be measured? Page 8.
Yeah, the page 8 ones are all on CMAS. We also use NWA, but.
And that's what I was wondering, was it
Yes,
NWA
yeah,
or?
we do, honestly, most of our internal measurements on NWA because we do it more often and we like the detail that it gives us. But I wrote these goals based on our school performance framework and our.
Okay. So
and
SAT
PSAT and SAT and PSAT.
Okay. So CMAS, SAT, and PSAT.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we use Dibbles for the reading data, but I don't know that's on the school performance framework, but yes, we use Dibbles.
Yeah. Okay. You also talk about in the academic gaps, you say that the gaps will be addressed in the UIP process. How do you progress monitor those, especially if your goals are end of year measurements? How are you progress monitoring to ensure you're on track?
That actually is probably a Penny question.
Hi. With our kiddos who are on read plans, we try and do the progress monitor for students whose composite is in the red, or if we have a classroom teacher or a parent who has expressed concern about their child's performance, we'll try and, for the kiddos whose composite is in red, it's once every 2 weeks is the goal. With kiddos whose composite is yellow, or if the parent reaches out to us and just says, hey, the accuracy of my child is off, there's something off, can you check it? So we'll do that once a month. And then with that, it's just a matter of communicating to the parents and the classroom teacher where the student is performing. The parents do have an end goal in mind. We give the Dibbles parent-friendly letters. We also communicate with our families just to let them know what is typical middle of the year. And so, for example, my second grade students in my daily lesson plans that I provide for parents to follow at home, I just say, you know, the end of year goal is 72 words per minute. At this point in the school year, your child should be reading 65 words per minute, and then we just chart that progress in Amplify.
Okay. Are you progress monitoring the CMAS growth? throughout
Yes,
the
we
year?
use mostly easy CBMs for that. That's the most common thing. We will occasionally use NWA. And I think I got stuff from Ellie. I think those are the most common ones we use for throughout the year progress monitoring.
In your application, you state that a screener for social emotional health will be identified and purchased for next year. I'm just wondering, what screeners are you guys looking at or considering?
So Somebody reached out to us as soon as we released the application and told us what to use. I don't know if I brought it. Was it Panorama?
Okay.
Yeah, that's what they suggested and thought that that was a good thing for us to use.
That's
since
what we
you
use,
guys
so.
use, yeah.
Okay. All right, evidence of support. Dan, is that you?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Well, I think we obviously continue to have some, although less, people are accepting more what we're doing, but we've continued to have people just say, hey, do you really have to change? Because, you know, what we've done is successful, they like it. So we've had people continue to say that. I will say that we were very conservative with our estimates on next year's enrollment. There were not enough unknowns. We really thought it was prudent to be conservative. But we've now launched our application form for next year, and we've had really good response, and it's quite honestly knocked our socks off. We're shocked at how strong it is coming in, particularly in middle school. I know in our application we projected that we would have 20 full-time students, and we've actually currently got 31 kids signed up for that, which is really interesting. We've got 10 part-time kids signed up. So just in middle school alone, we've got 41 children already saying they're going to come. So mhm. Yeah.
Support.
We believe they're likely to just do straight homeschool. Most of our families really don't want to be in a traditional school or even another charter school, not even Grand River. They generally speaking don't go to those places. There are definitely times that they do, and there are times that we refer them to other public, traditional public schools, but generally, no, they'd rather homeschool.
We also have heard from enough families that the ones who have not signed up yet are waiting for our actual schedule, which is coming out on Friday. We anticipate another spike once they can compare it to WCCC and what mods they're taking, that kind of stuff. We anticipate another spike then, but we have been pleased with the steady growth of who has said they're coming back.
Okay, thank you.
Back to me.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to ask planning for evaluating pupil performance and educational programming. Could you please articulate the shifts and/or adjustments that you are now making from what the K-5 programming will look like this year, and share exactly, you have it in your application, I think we understand, but I think it might be good for you guys to articulate it, especially in this sort of venue.
I'll start, and then Cammie will remember everything I forgot. So last year, about this time, we told our families that we would no longer be a full-time school program and that we would be a support program instead. So they began the shift to call themselves, there's another word, register themselves as homeschool students, and then sign up with us part-time for the support through our program. That gave them the responsibility for their curriculum and their grading and the kinds of things that traditional homeschoolers are responsible for. And so they started picking that ball up in August, and the students that attend our school are homeschooled on the other days of the week. On the days they attend with us, we supply extra support in ELA, in math, and currently science and art and STEM. And so they come to our site 2 days a week for those programs, or they have the option to come on Fridays, so it's 2 different tracks. They can come the Wednesday track and come twice, or they can come on the Friday trek and come once. Same kind of support, but obviously 1 day a week is a little less than the 2 days a week. We had more families choose the 2 days a week, a lot more than the 1 day a week option. We think a lot of that was because we've provided 2 day a week classes for years in the English language arts area. That's what Penny has taught for years, and they were already in that pattern, and they were already very appreciative of the English language arts support in particular. That is one of the harder things to cover all of it at home, so they wanted some of that support. So that's where we shifted to last year. It's been very successful and very popular. It's really gone well. That required all different hiring. It required a lot of changes on our part, but families have been very pleased. The enrollment in that program for the coming year is very strong, not getting a lot of hesitation on that. I think families were waiting to see what was this really going to be like, and then once they heard of other families liking it, they're starting, even some families that left last year in frustration that they didn't know what was happening, are now on our list and are starting to come back. So that transition has gone very well. We've been very pleased.
Cammie, did she miss anything? Okay. So you talk about in your application that you, wait, I just went ahead of myself a little bit. Okay. So will you, as a school, recommend that parents use a CDE-approved reading curriculum at home?
Yes.
Yeah, we've done that for a long
Well,
time.
So for this year, I mean, that was a big deal because all of our teachers are trained. They've taken the science and reading class. They're Orton Gillingham trained at the basic level. They're Wilson trained. They love teaching English language arts. And so it was very important for us, I've been here, I'm in my 10th year here, and we've seen curriculums that work, that are multisensory and systematic, and we've seen curriculums that fall on the weaker side. And so when we planned a curriculum this year for families to recommend, it was the all about spelling and all about reading system. And then in the classroom we don't use that curriculum, but we use Orton Gillingham based approach. And then we also use grammar, Voyage's grammar, and try and just stick as closely as to best instruction in literacy.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is more of a process question, but how do you go about selecting your program resources for each content? If you just share a little bit about that process and how you identify, obviously not in elementary, but for your middle and high.
Oh, for the middle and high. Yeah, that is, I was going to make you answer for elementary.
Talk to me about the adoption process.
So that has really been kind of a process of kind of an evolving process. When we began doing ELA classes, we actually had Penny and our other ELA teachers come together and decide what kind of approach they wanted to use. You know, if you recall or if you didn't know, several years of our program, we didn't have any classes. All of our students were schooled at home. So we never needed to answer that question. So we ended up using a novel-based approach, partially because that's what a lot of homeschoolers were already doing, partially because we liked that approach and we thought it tied in best to reading. So, writing. Homeschooling students tend to struggle a bit with the writing piece. It's harder to teach at home. It's harder to have another audience. And so by picking novels and short stories and things that we thought would interest them, then the writing develops off of that really nicely. And we liked the whole kind of the integrated approach of the grammar and the spelling and all that tying into what they were reading as opposed to separating it all out. And Penny may have anything to add to that about why we did.
Can I just add like a little bit more? I'm just wondering, is it totally teacher-driven then what novels you're going to choose? Or, what does that selection adoption process look like? Is it teachers? Is it
Started out
families?
as teachers, and I would say it's still teacher-driven. The teachers tend to adopt like one new book a year just because of changing needs they see in their students, or they feel like there's a gap in the kinds of books or the lexile levels of the books their choosing, but it is largely teacher-driven. That would be our primary source.
But we have definitely looked at district book lists as well and compared and made sure that we're not wildly divergent from district approaches.
Yeah, and I have those, all those wonderful, I don't know if you guys even still do that, but all the unit plans and all the things they do with it. So we try to pace it similarly and use a lot of those same concepts.
Great. The application noted that you're going to use NWEA, or you're going to require NWEA for your middle schoolers, for ELA and math. My wondering is about science, because science is going back on, for CMAS, and so are you planning to do science or just stick with ELA and math?
We've always been interested in doing science NWA. It's been, just because of the way our school is formatted, it's been hard to get our families to come in. Every time they have to test, they have to make an actual extra trip. Scheduling that's been very difficult. Getting buy-in from parents isn't always easy. So for one reason or another, we've never done the science, but we've kicked it around numerous times. We don't currently have a plan to add science. That's one more thing that we'd have to think through. I definitely think we would be open to adding it. It is something that we would like data on. It's just been logistically challenging. So I think that's kind of where we're at. We're open to it. We don't currently have a plan for it.
And the only reason that I ask is NWEA is aligned to Next Gen. And so those are the standards in which your students, our students, all of our students will be assessed
Right.
against.
Well, and we do obviously have our kids do the CMAS science, so there's that. But that's not going to hit all of our kids now, so we'll have to try and plug that hole.
Okay. All right, Mel, it's your turn.
Great, I'm still here. This is going back to the finance policies and procedures section, which, thank you, is laid out very well. One question on the record retention policy section is just that if it aligns to the minimum requirements of the Colorado State Archives Manual for school district. I know that's what we use as a guide, or how they were determined instead. Like, I just want to make sure that those minimums are at least followed, because a lot of the items mentioned a 7-year retention, a 6+ current, but especially like in the employment areas, there are some records that are required to be kept permanently.
Yes, and we do have those records permanently. It may not have been addressed in there, but we do follow all of the procedures that are requested for records retention.
Okay. And then also in your budget, when it talks about your audit services, I noticed that you are using a quote from Cutler. I was just wondering if that was something that you have moved ahead on, of switching from CSD to Cutler. And if so, what the reasoning behind that change from your current local auditor to a Denver-based one would be.
Actually, we have not moved forward on that. We did address it with the board. The board did approve for us to make that change if we felt it was necessary. At this time, we are holding off on that. You may or may not be aware that I did have a conversation with Ashley in regard to that. So at this point, we've just decided to kind of hold off and wait another year and see how things go. We were a little concerned with our timing last year with our audit. And so we thought perhaps, we know the other 2 charter schools are using John Cutler, and so we had thought about it might be easier if we all went with the same company, and that might be a better flow, but we're kind of going to wait another year before we make any further decisions.
I'm glad to hear that. I guess I would want to be involved in further discussion before you guys do or don't make a change.
Absolutely.
On that piece. So is on the budget side of things, is there a contingency budget in place? I know that you provided your 5-year And it sounds like your student enrollments are going great, but this is a big change. I know this year your enrollments were pretty spot on to their projections. But what if in the future those enrollment projections aren't met or other costs are higher? Specifically, what areas in the budget would be adjusted to cover any of those differences?
Yeah, well, as you know, we had a very large change in our FTE this year. So we were actually very pleased to have only been off a couple on that. That was a nice, it just went well. We were very pleased. So what we do in regard to the budget that you have in front of you for the 205, that is based on some information and surveys that we took from the parents several months ago. We felt this was going to be pretty close for this year, but as you know, it could go either way. We could either have less students or more students. I usually, though you don't see it, actually construct 3 to 6 budgets each year, depending on what our enrollment might be, either higher or lower, and usually use the middle one at first, but it could go either way. I do have contingency budgets all the way down to 175.
Awesome, thank you.
All right. Ms. Searit, you're welcome to ask that.
Are you on governance? Yeah, this is a typical governance question I gotta add, because even all the boards I've sat on, I've asked this myself. Currently, how does your board address accountability among themselves and staff? I know you have your bylaws, I went through your bylaws, those are standard bylaws, so those were all in order, but do you know how the board does their own accountability?
Not necessarily. I guess it depends on what you're talking about. I mean, like, we do a board training in the fall and that kind of,
Well, you had an agreement. In
Right,
your
right.
packet, you had a board agreement of
Right.
what their duties were and things that. So
Right. I mean, the only accountability I can think of off the top of my head is, the attendance. If they miss so many meetings and stuff, then that's what we follow up on. So I wouldn't say necessarily that they're doing that, we do that, but can you think of anything else?
Honestly, we've never had a problem that's needed to be addressed, so, but yes, there is an annual agreement every board member signs. I believe that the board members are chosen with care, and they are not likely to become a problem, but if they were, they would address it, self-police it, discuss it with each other first, and hopefully would never go further than that or need to, but I know we have had conversations around attendance. We've occasionally had some board members who missed more meetings than, or were starting to approach a threshold where it was looking like that was a problem, and those just got discussed and it turned around. So that's the only thing we've ever had to deal with.
yeah, it's hard because I sit on a board myself, and I'm like, well, how do they hold us accountable? You know what I mean? You pick people that you think are going to do what the
Right.
mission's supposed to do and follow the best interest.
Right.
And you're right, probably there's limited things you would do except for if
Right.
you had a.
But our policies do involve a procedure for removing.
Right,
so
and
it's in
choosing
there.
them.
Right, it
I
is in
saw
there.
the.
Right, if it came to that, we definitely have a process for it.
Yeah, okay.
All right, I thought you guys did a nice job in the section for employees, so I really don't have a lot of questions. Just a couple of quick ones, though. In transitioning to a new model, what information will change regarding employees? You referenced the employee handbook, and then in your application said some things are going to change. Just off the top of your head, do you have some big rocks that you know will change?
Do you know where that was referenced? I'm just kind of trying to, yeah, where that might be.
I can't remember if I read it.
I think it was schedules.
Yeah, I think what that was probably referring to is the way that we pay teachers, because they weren't even doing the classroom stuff, they were doing advising, and so we had to change our structure and how we pay in terms of how many hours equals, a day and things like that. I'm pretty sure that's what we would have been referring to.
I think in their schedules as well.
Right, because that's the other significant thing.
Yeah.
Is that when they were academic advisors before, so the majority of our staff was involved in advising homeschool families. So the families would come to site, We would sit down with them. We would walk through their curriculum, walk through their progress, all that kind of stuff. The advisors could create those schedules however they wanted. If they couldn't work on Tuesdays, then they didn't come on Tuesdays. It was very, very flexible. And now, of course, you can't teach that way. So they lost that flexibility if they committed to teaching a class, so that's a different structure than we're used to in the past. Because before, people pretty much made their own office hours, and then we publicized those. And now, of course, those have to fit into the confines of the schedule that we've put together.
So now they do have like regular business hours, so they're required to be there at 7:30 in the morning. They leave a half hour after class is done. So that is a change for those that were coming and going as they need to be.
Okay, okay, great. And then my other question is, so you've got 42 right now, and then going to the new model, do you know which positions will be impacted? Will that number increase, decrease, or what does that look like for staffing?
I'll start, and then you can fill that in. It will decrease, because a lot of those jobs were advising jobs. That's currently the process we're going through right now, is trying to figure out, we're pretty far along the road, but the first thing we did is anybody with a teaching degree or had the ability or interest to teach, that we were able to shift them first. So we do have a pool of people still that we are working on rehoming. We probably can't rehome all of them, so that's the hardest part of what we're doing right now. And our process is just one step at a time, and talking to groups, getting those jobs set, and then moving to the next kind of job. We still have some open-ended things that we don't know how long it's going to take. So we've got some, wiggle room in there, but we needed to first fill all of the classroom positions, and that we have just completed that. Literally, we're doing that this week, so moving through that, but it will be less than 42.
Is the rehoming going well so far?
Yeah, I think Penny was always a teacher, but she has all sorts of comrades now that haven't taught for a while, and most of them have really enjoyed being back in the classroom. It's been kind of fun. And it's 2 days a week, so that doesn't make it less work. I want to clarify that. Teaching 2 days a week in some ways is harder. You have so much more to get in. If a student misses a day, it's a big gap. The 2 day a week is not a walk in the park, but it is definitely family friendly. And if you need to alternate childcare with your spouse or whatever, it's flexible in that way. So I would say they've adjusted really, really well.
Anything to add, Penny?
No, it's just, you know how it is when you've worked with a group of people for so long, and to lose anybody, there's going to be some growing pains there, but it's hard and fun.
Yeah, that is definitely that.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult process.
We've had a
No,
good retention.
definitely.
Yeah, we have a very high retention, and we're a very, very close staff, so it's made
And
the part
of the
very hard.
42, what's the breakdown of teachers and then support staff or classified staff? Half and half, a little less than that?
Are you looking that up, Julie, or do you want me to take a guess?
I'm going to see if it'll let me get in here.
I think we're at,
Just ballpark, doesn't have to be.
I think we're close to half teachers now, or will be when we're done with the whole process. And then we've got 6 SPED folks, 6 admin teachers, and then a few support.
Great, all right, thanks so much.
This next question really weaves really nicely into what Nikki had just asked. This is a question that came out of our district accountability committee that really had gone through the enrollment policy section, and just a general question that I think you've started to answer, and that is they just wanted to know, when you have an approximate 30% drop in FTE, how do you still financially operate? I think that was the big question. How are you still a viable campus with a drop in FTE? So I don't know who wants to take that one, but it was a good question from
Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult, obviously, when you have that large of a drop. For us, obviously, part of that was we did let some staff members go last year. And so you're talking about full-time staff and benefits and all those parts coming off. Each year, we never spent all of our budget. So a significant chunk of our budget ended up going into a savings, into C-Safe, or, so we didn't ever use everything that we had budgeted out either. We also, for our kiddos, as you know, our model was such that each student would get $2,000 and they could spend that on curriculum. We had last year, not everyone spend that, so those dollars were left over. So we actually had a significant amount of dollars left over that offset that. Obviously, to some degree, you have an increase in PPR, and all those increases helped offset it as well. So pretty much between those items, we did cut some things out of the budget. Some things got whittled down pretty significantly, but we were able to still function and not be sacrificing really or suffering because of the areas that we actually cut down. We were able to just make some decisions in some areas where we could supplement something else and not have an issue. So it was a little tough. We did have to, this year, it's possible we may have to dip into our CSAFE a little bit to pull some funds back over to help balance this out, but we don't anticipate having to do that next year. And the budget that was submitted does not include us having to go back into our reserves again a second time.
I think it's worth clarifying too. So those learning funds that we used to designate for students, now that we don't need to designate those for students, that frees up. It's not just leftover money that wasn't used of that. That's a significant part of our budget that used to go directly to students that now goes back into the budget. So that helped cushion the loss pretty significantly.
Yeah, so for example, for this year, the 6 through 12 who are still receiving those funds, that was approximately $398,000. So that we will not be putting out next year for that. Obviously, we'll still be paying for our CMU students, et cetera, but it's not going to be anywhere near that amount. So that will come back into our general fund to be used in other places.
Yes, and we, 3-4 years ago, we designed a website to do all of our logging, all of our tracking. Our students log into it every week. They log everything they've done. It does our transcripts. It does our contact log. It does everything. And we paid a whale of a lot of money for it that now we can't use. So that money will also move back into the budget.
I'm just wondering, Mel, did you have any follow-up questions on that particular one?
I guess just, yeah, thinking through this, and obviously we're in the same boat of ESSER, right? It's coming to an end. Are you relying on that currently for any positions, or has that all been above and beyond?
That's all primarily been above and beyond, except for we did hire a part-time mental health counselor this year. About 30,000 or so of what we received from ESSER actually was to cover her benefits and her salary. That's been moved back into the general budget. So we didn't rely on it. It was just, to us, we approached it as being a bonus through the ESSER, but we were not relying on that to continue.
Okay, that's all I had.
All right. I would echo what Nikki said. Thanks for the good information that you provided. I only have just a few questions to go over with you. The first one is on nutrition services. I think we had done a pilot program with Lunch Lizard, and we had a pretty low response to that. Do you foresee us doing anything else with Lunch Lizard moving forward with any enrollment increases?
I would love to talk about that with you. We've never done anything with Lunch Lizard at our school.
Oh.
We know very little about it. We are very intrigued. We have kids bringing their cold lunches. We have kids forgetting to bring their cold lunches. And I know that the Healthy School Meals for All thing was passed. in the
Yes.
state, and I don't know what the district response is yet. I don't know if you guys have even decided, but so we're very interested in discussing that with you. And we don't have a facility that would be a kitchen or anything like that. So maybe we could chat about that and see if there's anything the district would recommend that we could do. If not, our kids will just keep bringing cold lunches, and when they forget them, we'll keep giving them something.
That's good. Yeah, would love to talk to you about it.
Okay.
And then, as we talk today, just tell us a little bit about your long-range planning and what that looks like.
Like for a facility?
Facilities long-range planning.
That's a great question. It's hard for us to do long-range planning because things keep shifting. We've continued to move locations, and now that we have our new location, we've continued to develop it, and now we're having to redo how we use our facility because of this these changes. At the moment, we're quite honestly scrambling to get enough classrooms. We have some approaches for that. I think we have we have the ability to do what we need to for next year. Expanding would be hard. So our expansion or our long-term plan would involve taking some of these dreams we've had. We've thought about a lot of different things we could do with the building. But we will need to try to refine those dreams and say what's really practical, and within our new model, which honestly, we're still just grappling with this. I mean, we've had to do a pretty quick turnaround on how we're transitioning. So the facility has mostly fallen to the how can we meet this year's needs. It's not that we don't have the other in mind, but it's certainly not on the forefront. So I don't know if that's a good enough answer.
No, it's a great answer. I would say that in some of the information that you provided, from what I could see, there was a lot of infrastructure pieces that were put in place, the HVAC systems and the things that are really needed that sometimes aren't the pretty stuff,
Right.
but are essential to keeping the building running.
And we've definitely worked to update electrical and things like that. We've tried to always be mindful in every addition or change we've made, to be mindful of what are future capabilities. When we get our update to the HVAC in the gym this year, they're going to also be further expanding our electrical, and part of that is for the HVAC, but also because they know that there is potential for building more above the gym or above that family meeting room area, which will also need more electrical. So we're trying to make sure that we're building out that capacity as well.
I would say that's part of your planning, because it's being done well. It looks like it's being done.
Yeah, it's just not all written down, but it's definitely how we're approaching it.
And then just lastly, your process for hiring and procuring qualified architects and general contractors.
Yeah, we do actually, FCI has always done our, all our construction from the get-go, so we continue to use them. However, we have, in compliance with what we were supposed to do, have had bids from other places as well. We just have always gone back to FCI because they know our structure so well. There's a lot less prep, and they know what they've done previously. It's very easy for them just to continue that process. But yes, we have gone out for bids and met with other construction companies as well, but I've gone back to FCI if there's been a very small difference in that bid, if it's small enough to where we can justify staying with the company, that would probably actually in the long run be better for us.
Great.
Just because I know not everybody toured the building, just for anybody who's listening, that building is 25 years old, and it is hitting what all of our houses do when they get to 25 years old. It has a lot of weird little, how come they did this kind of thing. And so having somebody who's encountered those things and remembers them from the last phase has been super helpful.
Try the 60-year-old buildings. We've got a couple of those.
Yeah. I think the other piece too is we would love to, do more with our building. We certainly have the space for it, as you saw earlier, but there's also the funds part, and you have to make sure that the space that you develop, you're going to use, the cost-wise, you're going to actually use it wisely, and there'll be enough use of it. So there's those pieces too, and I think our biggest thing for us is we don't want to have any more debt than what we have right now. We have that COP. We were blessed by you guys to have that COP, but we don't want to incur any more debt at this point, especially at a time when we're making these changes and we need to let it roll for a while and see what the success is. Certainly if we have enough families who are wanting to come into our program and it becomes, we have such a waiting, or we can't fit kids and we're at capacity and now we have issues, that's something to address, because then that, by taking those extra students and receiving the funding for them, it's going to offset that. But at this point, we just don't want to incur any more debt.
Sounds wise. Thank you.
So before you jump in for more, I am gonna go off script just because it has come up in some recent conversations with board members, and you describe in the application the student safety and security section, and I think the question from board members or the community is, with our district charter schools, how do they interact with the ability to work with our safety and security teams if you do, and obviously it's articulated there, but it's about are they working with us? Are they partnering with us? So maybe just talk about your partnership, with district safety and security, and then just that we're keeping our kids safe at our school, just like, all the other schools in District 51. So
Absolutely. So I will say, we so appreciate the support from D51. We have Rob Barker as our safety and security officer. He is there whenever we need him. Thank goodness, that is very rare. But he does stop in, and he's available all the time. We do follow a procedure for safety and security. So he does a walkthrough at the beginning of the year. We do participate in fire drills. We just had one. Lockdown is to come here in about a month or so. So we do follow all those procedures. We stay on task with that. I'm in touch with Tanny when I need to be. And we have radios. We do have radios upstairs and downstairs, so we can contact people when we need to. But it's very important to us that we follow all those procedures and that our kids are safe. The one thing that's interesting is because of where we're located, most people don't even know we're back there. So that part is actually a blessing, as strange as it may seem, and so that part's great. But we do follow all the procedures. We have our drills. We know the procedures should we need to shelter in place, lockdown. I do stay in touch on the radio, so I know if the surrounding schools are going into any kind of a situation, so.
I don't think I noticed, but how many points of ingress, egress are there in that building? I didn't notice that today. Okay.
It would be 7 if you count the garage door. Yeah, by the garage.
It's 7, I
There's
believe it's
one
7.
there
That's
to the
right.
left.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's 7, actually.
But to clarify, there's only one you can go in unless
Correct.
you are staff and you have
Are
access.
the others fobbed then? Or they
Not
can't?
all of them, but many of them.
Okay.
Oh, and actually, there's one on the second.
We have some interior doors that are fobbed as well.
Yeah.
So like you can't go up the stairs to the second floor, that's on a fob as well. Yep, and then back into the staff area, we've got another one going into another family area, so they do have to use a fob. We have an interior door upstairs, or exterior door upstairs where you can go out, but if you want to come back in, you have to have a fob to use it as well.
I was just going to say, when we built the building, we were intricately involved with D51 security and staff and all that. And it's just good to look at the history. So we were originally a contract school before we were a charter school. And as a contract school, we had no choice. We were just part of them. So we established all those relationships back then. And then when we became a charter school, that was just natural to continue those. So we kind of have a leg up on that, in that we were handed it in the beginning. And so we've been able to keep those relationships and connections that other charter schools may not necessarily have, because they were never literally a district school. So it's important to remember that, that was 2008. We became a charter school in 2014. We kept most of that. And then through this third switch, we've still been able to pull most of that through. So we've got some connections and understandings of the process that wouldn't normally maybe be a part of a charter school structure, but because of where we started, it is.
Good, thank you. Okay.
All right. Tammy Errett may want to chime in as well or ask some follow-up questions. You talk about in your application that, especially for the elementary students, that you don't provide those special ed services because they're homeschooled students. So my question is, how many students do you think, or how many students do you know are not receiving services because they've chosen not to, because they don't want to go back to a homeschool or a neighborhood school?
Well, I know we only have 1 year. So the students that we had last year that we have this year, of those students, I don't know that it's right for me to actually say how many it is because it isn't that big of a number and this is recorded. But of those students, 20% moved and 15% went to another school. So that means we kept the rest of them. And right now, they're being supported by the READ plan and the meetings with that. We provide classes, we're calling it, for struggling students that are open to all students, but those are the students who want them. And they already had a relationship with those staff members, so that was an easy connection to say, hey, you want to meet with me? So they're meeting with them once or twice a week. We do the same with occupational therapy kinds of things, like handwriting help and things like that. We also have people with that expertise come into the classrooms and work with all of the kids. So we have some kids that meet specifically with people. Honestly, if they just request to meet somebody and get help with their struggles, then they meet with them. And then we have others that go into the classroom and support all of the kids on some of those basic kinds of skills so that they're all getting that input.
You're not running, you don't have IEPs
Correct,
at all?
correct, for K-5, right.
A5, right. But 6 through, you
Right, 6 through
are
12 we do.
servicing IEPs on that.
Right.
So I want to build a little bit more off the READ Act. You do in your application say that your K-3 teachers are READ Act. They're approved or have done their certificate. My question is, what PL did you use for that? And then what PL are you planning to do as the administrator and then your teachers that are teaching reading 4 through 12?
Do you remember the name of it? It was the CDE one that the
Okay.
district did
No,
last year.
you did it online with CDE.
Yeah.
That's Pepper, but yeah,
Yes, yes.
it wasn't a trick question, really.
Okay, all right, that was it. That was the one that all of our teachers did. And I will confess that I got partway through it and I'm not done yet.
Okay.
So I will finish that by the end of the year. We had a few other things come up, so, but yeah, they all use the same program.
So that self-paced program through CDE, and you expect that the other teachers, your 4th through 12th, who are supporting and teaching reading to students on READ plans?
Yeah, I think they already have,
I think everybody's complete.
because they were all with us last year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have one that's in process who's new, but everybody else is completed.
Great. Can you talk a little bit, we're going to go back to special ed now, just how are you, what does it look like for your different students on IEPs, those services based on their identified disability? Can you share a little bit about how that programming looks?
Yeah, it evolves over the years, but we have one high school sped provider and we have 2 middle school sped providers. And they meet with those students, they meet with them for all of the minutes in their IEP, and then they do additional push-in support for classes that they're taking on campus, if they're taking classes on campus. So that piece will look a little different next year, because they'll all need to take classes on campus. But this year, they would still have the option to not be on campus, in which case they come to the school and all of their minutes are met with that teacher. Excuse me, usually on a small, we don't have huge populations, so like our biggest class, I think, is 7. And we have an ELA and a math, and they in both high school and middle school for that. And then their OT services are separate from that, and their SLP services are separate, and we just coordinate all these schedules according to what the parents want, as kids are coming and going at different times because of when their classes might be.
Do you have any follow-up? I'm just wondering then about ADA compliance for other, not necessarily learning disability or, how, are you guys fully
ADA?
ADA?
Yes, and we forgot to show you when we were there, but we have a,
Yes, I forgot to, that's
yeah,
right.
we have a lift, and that's a
Okay.
piece for them.
All right. And then,
I will add, since you paused, FCI is amazing at making sure we meet all those every time we build something, so that's been nice.
can you talk a little bit more specifically about the resources that you're using for your students on IEPs that are meeting those specific academic goals?
Yes, hopefully I hit all of them. I'm not sure that I will. I actually think my list is mostly from the younger ones, which is Lexia and ConMappers and Alex. I know they use Wilson and Foundations and Voyages. I'm missing one, though. There's a math program that I think is actually in here. Yeah, it is listed. Because it was one I wasn't familiar with. I'll let you find it, maybe.
Saxon?
No, they do use the Saxon with some of the middle school students, but the high school teacher uses something different. They do use a lot of Matthew C. And a lot of the manipulatives that come with Matthew C. but he has another program called Moving with Math Learning Systems and West Ed Math Pathways and Pitfalls. And then high school, they use a combination of teaching textbooks and Math UC. What is that one? AGS Publishing Mathematics Concepts and Basic Math, and Pacemaker Practical Math for Consumers.
Thank you. I want to just ask a little bit. I thought it was creative, and I understand why. I'm going to wonder about progress monitoring. And I know that you were saying that in the application it talks about the 5 days, then the 10 days, and then you created the formula. Yes, so you can see why I'm just wondering how you created the formula. Then it was 2 days, so it was going to be 5 weeks instead of 10 days.
I believe the district progress monitors every 2 weeks, right? So that's
Correct,
14 days.
correct.
So every 14 days of instruction, I think, is the pattern that we equated that to, is that if you were progress monitoring after 14 days of instruction, actually it'd be 10 days of instruction.
10 days.
We don't do that on the weekends. Then we would progress monitor every 10 days of our instruction, which would come to a few weeks.
I'll just be interested to see how that formula works. I mean, if I'm worried it's not enough.
Yeah.
I'm worried it's not enough. It's too far in between. And I would assume, though, that that's not necessarily the progress monitoring that you would do with students on IEPs. You would need to monitor that maybe a little bit more closely or a little bit more frequently. But I see where you made the formula. I'm just wondering if that's going to be too spread out, too far apart.
It may well be. Kathy Lynn has helped us with a lot of that and doing that progress monitoring. So unfortunately, I don't know how she would answer that question. But yeah, I think all of that will be figured out and evolving through next year as we figure out exactly how those schedules are going to work.
Because they would still, your students are still expected, while they're only with you for 2 days a week, they're still doing school 5 days a week.
Correct,
So the teaching and learning is still
Yeah.
evolving
And
throughout
the
week.
reason I think they did that is that if you did it every 2 weeks and it took a class period to do it, you're only getting 3 days of instruction every 2 weeks, and they didn't want to lose that instruction time. That's what it came down to. And then sometimes they'll just roll that into that instruction. But yeah, it may not be the best formula.
Yeah, more to come.
Yeah.
I think that's all my questions, correct? No, I have a whole other page. All right, I'm done. No, I'm not. You're not done with me yet. Our English language, I know, one of you can jump in. I just wondered, you had mentioned in your application that your students, English language learners, you're not programming, you don't have programming plans because at this time you don't have any students that would be identified by that. I would just encourage, that's something on the rubric, then it would come down, no plan. I do appreciate, though, you're very transparent in saying we will work with District 51, but I'm just wondering if,
Well, we also have two teachers who have masters in ELL, so that's definitely a good step in the right direction for a plan, but we have not developed exactly what that would look like.
okay. And then your students identified as GT. I would assume, GT there are many categories and identified it's not just academic, so ensuring that you have that referral and that process to ensure that the other areas or categories in which a student can be identified GT.
Yes, and we have a staff member who works with GT, and she goes to all the district GT meetings to get our students identified, so that part's been in place for quite a while, and it shouldn't look a lot different. And we use the COGAT for the screening.
Yes, I saw that you have COGAT. And we do it for second grade in the district, but I think you did it for other grades.
We do.
Or do you just?
We
second?
opened it up to students because we serve homeschool students. If they come in as a sixth grader and their parent would like to know, or we're like, then we will do all of the grades if they request it. So we routinely do second and 7th.
7th, that's what I
We-
say. I thought I
we
remember
have
7th.
a whole lot of other grades in there being tested at the same time if they have not been COGAT tested before.
Okay, this really is my last question, and it has to do with the counseling role. And you, in your application, talk about how your counselor is supporting students. You talk about SEL and social emotional behavior. My wondering is, what about that guidance, that college and career readiness and ICAPS? Who's supporting that? Because I didn't see those in your
And
application.
actually, that's one of those things that you didn't state the obvious because it's right in front of you. So we have 5 academic advisors, high school advisors who meet with those students every month, and they're doing that every single month. So they're doing one layer of that when they meet with students about their work and about their progress. And then we have 2 people that are doing the next level of meeting them about their plans and their, we have one gal who does all the enrollment at WCCC and CMU and how that fits into their ICAP. And then the 3rd level would be the actual ICAP participation, which we also do. We've got, I don't know, we had a really high percentage last year of kids that are actually participating, and it was Naviance last year, so I.
Okay, that's what I was just gonna, are you using a platform?
Yeah,
'Cause
we're
we've
using the same
switched.
one you are.
The school links?
Yeah, it
Okay.
took us like, I don't know, if anybody here was in on that, like 6 weeks to get our kids connected right in there. It was a nightmare, but yeah, they're using school links.
Okay, all right. That really is my last question.
Sure.
Do you have any? Okay. Anybody? No.
All right, well, that concludes our questioning as a whole, so I guess I would open it up to you guys. If you have any questions for us, feel free to ask, so.
Can I interject really quickly? So Melanie, if you're still on board, line 40, which is technical consulting, that budget figure will actually go away. We're using synergy, so that will be reallocated.
Okay, great. I'll make note of that.
That's always a good one.
It's
to,
always
like,
a good
finish off with, like Mel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a financial win is like, right? So,
Well, one of my questions you already brought up with the lunch lizard thing, so we'll chat about that later. I think my biggest question is, and I'd kind of thrown this in the application, but I don't know if any of you flagged it. We know that the district needs to record keep for homeschool students, and we're all about homeschool, and we would love to be able to take that burden off of you if you would like to get rid of that and allow us to do that record keeping for you. We think it would be great for us to be a one-stop shop for the district and homeschoolers. I understand if that's not something you're interested in, but it's
Interesting, because Dan and I talked about that, not your request, but just how important it was. We were wondering about the record keeping. How are we ensuring, or how are you ensuring that your students are signing up or registering as homeschools? I think that's something we can talk about,
we'd
certainly.
love to discuss it. I think it would be easier in a lot of ways. We already have their NWA scores if they've taken them with us. And so we were even just the other day talking about,
Yeah.
oh, wait, do they have to actively submit those to the district? But, we have a spreadsheet that we submit to the district, so it'd be just a little bit easier to check these things off, I think.
We actually, part of the other conversation that we are having is, you've got such a niche in our community. I really appreciated your executive summary. No, we don't have a philosophy or I was like, you really don't. But you fit, right? It just fits. And how can we ensure that we are promoting this charter school to our homeschool students? And I think it's a great opportunity for our valley and for our community. So I definitely think this is something that we can talk about. I don't know what it would look like. I don't know exactly how we could, but I think it's a conversation for sure, because I think this would help you guys, it would help our community, ensure that, just build our community as a whole.
Right. I think my other question is maybe not best for this forum, but so you don't necessarily have to answer it now, but we've really struggled to understand what the district's approach to homeschoolers with concurrent enrollment at college, WCCC and CMU. We've run into just confusing information from different years, different documents. So we'd really love to understand a little bit better what the district's approach to that is. And again, we'd love to help plug in kids into that.
Again, I would say, yeah, let's talk about that. I don't know that we have an approach, and yeah, how might we identify what that approach is and create some sort of flow chart and a document that would identify that and ensure that, because of course we want our students to have that opportunity and obviously even more so if they're involved in Mesa Valley Community School, our district, our system. So yeah, I think that's just another conversation.
Okay. Did you want to talk about income credit at all? No?
Well, I can't pass up a mic if we're going to close up the meeting. I just want to summarize for anybody that maybe didn't read the whole application that we feel like we fill, like you said, a niche in this valley. Our parents don't want to put their kids in a traditional school 5 days a week. That's why they're here. The 2-day-a-week model works really nicely for them. It gives them a lot of flexibility. It gives them a lot of time at home. We will now be providing the curriculum, but it still gives them that time at home that they value and that family life that our families have come to value. So we feel like we are a unique offering in the valley. We don't compete with anybody. There's nobody else that does what we're proposing to do. And I just kind of want to summarize what that's what we're looking to do here. And it's messy and it's quick because this has all been put together, in a relatively short amount of time. But we feel like we have a plan that could support homeschoolers, but also raise the bar of the education that they are providing and that we are providing. And it's really a really good mix. So that's our plug.
It's a good way to end it.
Okay.
So, okay.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate your
Thank you.
time tonight. So, okay.
That's pretty good. That's really good.